Let's ask Dan Wiederer what he thinks. He is covering the owners' meetings in Florida. And I believe George McCaskey spoke this afternoon, too. And I'm not seeing anything to come away from this. Is that the case, Dan? Did George just speak?
Yeah, Silvy, we just got done speaking with George just a little bit ago out by the waves of the Atlantic Ocean here at the Breakers Resort in Palm Beach. A much more relaxed environment for George than the last time that he had to speak with us in mass after firing Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace in January. Not a lot of news to come out of George. The Bears obviously have the stadium issue still hanging out there, and George essentially said that until the property closes on Arlington Park, which won't be till late 2022, early 2023, there aren't going to be many updates from the team in terms of their explorations and their pursuits and the things that they're going through with that operation.
What I want to know, Dan, is, and we saw they've recently hired, I believe there was a breaking news story a week ago, they hired like an architecture firm that designed the same stadium in Vegas. Why aren't they more willing to say, our intention is to build a great stadium in Arlington Park, but we can't say that for sure until we agree on the deal? You know what I mean? Like, they haven't even said that much.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Silvy. I'm not sure why publicly that's their stance. I think their actions probably speak to us a little more loudly. I've kind of pressed George today because big stadium news this week for the league with the Bills basically reaching an agreement with their state and their government officials to get $850 million of public funding to get a new stadium built adjacent to where they currently play, which, as you guys know, is one of the oldest stadiums. It trails only Arrowhead, Lambeau Field, and Soldier Field in terms of the oldest stadiums in the league. And so now here the Bears are in that mix trying to get a new stadium. I think maybe potentially, obviously it's not just the closing of the land that's instrumental to this. Silvy, I think there's a big piece of this is, okay, how are we going to fund this? And until you have answers to those questions, I don't think you want to sort of publicly state that this is going to happen. Obviously, we can see their actions hiring consulting firms, architecture firms that can help them create a vision. But there's a lot of steps in this process. It can be a slow and tedious slog.
They're going to open a lemonade stand to raise money. Of all that you heard the last several days, Dan, whether it was from owner George, it was from the new general manager, the new head coach, what caught your ear the most?
Yeah, so Tommy, I think that this setting allows the leaders of the organization to be a little bit more relaxed, and in a lot of ways that allows them to be a little bit more candid. And I think what we've heard sort of directly from Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus is that they are in lockstep in understanding that this is not going to be a quick fix. It's the reason that you come to an agreement on a trade to send one of your best defensive players across the country in exchange for draft capital, because you realize what you, me, the three of us have been saying forever, that they're not that close to contending for meaningful championships. And so to basically publicly state that, to do it with the actions that they've had in the last month, to understand that this is going to be a baby step process to build this team into a contender, I think there's a shared vision there. And now it's all about how can you retain that internal patience at Hallis Hall, and how can you sell this to a group of fans that is so fried and so burnt out and so sick of constantly starting over. That's going to be a tough tightrope for this regime to walk. But I think from the outset, they're at least willing to get on that tightrope and give it a try.
It was refreshing to see Ryan Poles actually answer questions with some pretty, I think, revealing answers. Is this just the honeymoon period that exists as a general manager takes over his role in the first year? Or do you believe that Ryan Poles will handle that position differently than his predecessor?
I don't know. I laughed because there were a couple questions that were pretty direct that he answered directly, and you say, whoa, that was refreshingly to the point. And you say, is this just the first-time general manager still trying to figure out what he can say and when he can say it? Or is this just his candor and what he's going to be like going forward? Obviously saying to us directly yesterday, hey, we are trying to trade Nick Foles, right? And nothing has popped yet, but hey, we're trying to trade him. Obviously we know that when you sign Trevor Siemian, but the GM to vocalize that is key. And then just to explain some of the things that went on, A, with the Mac trade, B, more significantly this month with the failed signing of Larry Ogunjobi, which is a major disappointment and a setback for a first-time GM to sort of have that sort of big splash effort in his first trip into free agency blow up on him. There certainly was some candor there, some explanation there, and we'll see if we're able to retain that with Ryan as we get to know him a little better in the years ahead.
Yeah, and the fans want substance too, and I want to ask you about those things, like whether it's the Ogunjobi failing of the physical, and then not being able to pivot because there was a period there where other guys were signing, and then is getting a guy who agreed on a contract, the restricted free agent, and not making it restricting enough where the Bills couldn't match. Like, are these things that Ryan Poles deserves blame on, or is this just the price of doing business?
Well, look, in the Ogunjobi case, I think it's a little bit, I don't want to say troubling, but it's at least, concerning that the Bears had such a different assessment of what they thought. I mean, they were ready to guarantee him close to $24 million, right, on a $40 million deal because they believed in the player, they believed in the character, and they thought that their medical examination was going to turn up something far different than it turned up. And so the major gap in what they were expecting the medical exam to turn up and what actually came forth is something that internally they have to figure out, why was there such a gap there? Was it part of the communication process with the agents? What happened that led us down that path, as you mentioned, that then eventually cost us 3 days' time, right, to be in the deep end of free agency and potentially pursuing options, not only for the defensive line, but for other major positions of need, and to kind of miss out on that because you made a miscalculation on your first headline free agency. That's something you got to address. You got to make sure that doesn't happen again in the future. If it relates to Ryan Bates, I mean, I think there's been this sort of mushrooming in the last 10 days of, all of a sudden everyone was acting like Ryan Bates was this fix to the offensive line that was going to cure all ills. I mean, the guy was a 4-game starter last year. It's a guy they missed out on, a guy the Bills obviously believe in enough to keep. But I don't think this is one of those ones that 5 years from now we're going to be going, oh, my God, I can't believe the Ryan Bates signing never happened.
With all of this that has transpired, do you expect them to be active during the draft with regard to moving picks to acquire more picks?
I think they'd like to be, right? You always have to find willing trade partners. I think one of the things that Ryan sort of stated in adding that third day 2 pick in the Mac trade is it now allows you either to come out of night 2 of the draft with 3 players at a sweet spot on the draft board where you think, okay, well, these are 3 guys that can help us immediately and become long-term contributors to our franchise. Or, hey, we've got 3 picks. We can maybe trade one of these, still get 2 players on that day, maybe add an extra player, pick or 2 on day 3 to help us add more bodies and more options to get some of these other picks and sticks. So there is some flexibility there. And I think right now, Ryan's in the mode of look, we got to add a lot of players at a lot of different positions. And so we have to explore the options that give us the ability to cast the widest net possible to bring in the most possible, potential contributors to our franchise to try to get this rebuild accelerated faster than it seems to be at this point.
You've always been that guy, whether it's to us, whether it's to Cap, whether it's to some fans saying, look, rosters aren't built in March and there's a long way to go till September. What I want to know, though, Dan, is they've got this void at left tackle in particular, and maybe even at right tackle. We don't know if Borum or Jenkins are going to be able to play right tackle. I mean, could they be 0 for 2 and then drafting a guy in the second round? It's a lot to ask for him to start in his rookie year. Where are these tackles going to come from?
So this is what should give you a little bit of
anxiety. Yeah, right. There is no tackle tree.
This is what should give you a little bit of an anxiety as you assess this situation. It's that the Kansas City Chiefs a year ago, coming off of that Super Bowl loss, were hell-bent on fixing their offensive line going into 2021, right? And so Ryan Poles and that front office spent their entire offseason a year ago trying to find every option they could, whether it was free agency, the draft, trades, whatever they needed to do to try to upgrade their offensive line. So that means Ryan Poles was dialed in on the evaluations of Tevin Jenkins, of Larry Borum, and he has yet to say anything that gives you a sense that he has strong belief that these guys are long-term starters for this program. So to your point, if you wind up 0 for 2 with picks that the previous regime made, and now you've got to do what we've long talked about being the major flaw of this organization, is constantly using resources to correct past mistakes. Well, now here you are. The tires are spinning again. They're in the mud. You can't ever get any forward momentum going. And so we'll see. I know Ryan sort of said this week that he wants to see some of these players get out on the grass. He seemed to stress that, look, Tevin Jenkins primarily played right tackle in college. Would like to take a look at him there. Larry played a lot on the left side in college. Would like to give him a try there. That's a flip of sides from what we saw from the previous coaching staff and the previous regime last year. And so, again, this is part of the process when you're starting over. You've got new eyes on everything, and they may not see things the way that the previous regime saw them.
Yeah, I'm totally on the outside looking in, but I don't think Ryan Poles likes his roster. I think that he feels that there's a lot of work to be done.